Preston Vale's voice thundered through the marble corridors, sharp enough to stop the clocks. The cry had pierced the stillness of the mansion, and now so had he. Maya Williams froze mid-swipe of the window pane on the second floor, her microfiber cloth still damp in her hand. She had only been working at the Vale estate for 5 days, assigned to routine cleaning on the east wing. No one ever mentioned the 5th floor. In fact, most of the staff avoided it like it was cursed. But that sound, the shrill, cyclical sobbing that now rose again, wasn't something she could ignore. It wasn't a hungry cry. It wasn't sleepy or cranky. It was the sound of panic, the kind that clawed from the inside out. "Miss," the butler called from downstairs. "Stay clear of the upper wing." She didn't answer. Maya climbed the final steps, heart racing. At the end of the hallway, behind a partially opened door, flickering light pulsed from a sensory projector. A boy, maybe 7, sat curled on the carpeted floor, rocking violently, hitting his forehead in rhythm against a bookshelf. No supervision, no comfort, just pain and repetition. She paused at the threshold. Everything in her said to turn back, but something deeper, something old and buried, kept her rooted. Her brother, Jermaine, used to do the same thing. Same rocking, same sound. She remembered it vividly under the dinner table, arms tight across his chest, face streaked with tears no one could understand. Maya stepped softly into the room and crouched several feet away. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, voice barely audible over his cries. "I'm not going to touch you. Just sitting right here." The boy didn't respond, but his movement slowed slightly. She kept her hands in sight, palms up. Then slowly, she lifted one hand and traced a simple sign across her chest. Safe. A motion she hadn't used in years, one her grandmother had taught her to calm Jermaine when words failed. The boy glanced at her, just a flicker, then resumed rocking. If this moment touched your heart, give this a like, comment on what you're feeling, and share it with someone who might need to see it. And to not miss the next part of this story, be sure to subscribe to the Unheard Voices channel. A sharp voice cut through the air behind her. "What the hell are you doing?" Maya turned quickly. Preston Vale stood in the doorway, a towering figure of tailored precision and barely contained fury. In one hand, he clutched his phone. The other gripped the doorknob like it might snap under his fingers. "I'm sorry, sir," Maya said, standing instinctively. "I heard him crying." "And who gave you permission to be in this room?" "No one. I thought he might be in danger. Step away from my son." Her muscles stiffened, but she obeyed. Carefully, she stepped aside as Preston strode toward the boy. The moment he tried to lift his son, the child erupted, screaming louder, kicking, clawing, his arms flailing in full panic. Preston struggled to hold him, shocked by the intensity. "What's wrong with him?" he muttered. "Why does he?" "May I?" Maya said gently, stepping forward again. Preston didn't stop her. She knelt, reached out, and the moment the child felt her presence, his screaming eased. He twisted toward her and collapsed into her arms like he'd been waiting for her all along. His small hands gripped her sleeve. He buried his face in her shoulder. The silence that followed was absolute. Preston stared, stunned. "How? What did you do?" "I didn't do anything, sir," Maya said softly. "I just listened and signed." You know, sign language a little. My brother, he's nonverbal autistic. This used to help him calm down." Preston's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. His suit looked suddenly too tight for him. His presence, so forceful a minute ago, was now suspended, like he didn't know what to do with himself. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maya. Maya Williams. I clean the East Wing." "You're not a therapist?" "No, sir. Just a cleaner." He watched her hold his son like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Can you stay a little longer today?" Maya nodded, still swaying gently with the boy in her arms. "Yes, sir," she whispered. Preston turned, walking slowly out of the room. For the first time in months, the house was still. No echoes of pain, no tense footsteps, no slammed doors, just a boy and a stranger. Now, not so strange, wrapped in quiet understanding. And though Preston didn't say it, the look on his face said everything. Something had shifted. Something was beginning. This is just the start of their story. Don't miss what happens next. Like this post, share it with a friend, and subscribe to the Unheard Voices channel for more. The sun had dipped lower by the time Maya descended the stairs again, her back slightly aching from holding the boy for so long. "Eli," She had heard Preston call him, had finally drifted to sleep in her arms. His face pressed into the curve of her shoulder like he belonged there. She had laid him gently on a bean bag in the corner of his nursery, covering him with a weighted blanket she'd found folded in the closet. He hadn't stirred. Now the grand mansion felt heavier than it had when she first entered it. Each chandelier sparkled but felt cold. Each marble tile under her feet clicked like a reminder that she didn't belong. She was a cleaner, a temp no less. And she had just broken a major boundary. She turned toward the service hallway, expecting to be dismissed, maybe even terminated on the spot. "Miss William." The voice came from behind her, clipped and clear. She turned and found Preston Vale standing at the end of the corridor, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He was no longer holding his phone. Instead, he held a small notepad, a legal pad, the kind that usually came out when something official was about to happen. Maya straightened instinctively. "Yes, sir. In my office, please." Her heart sank a little. She nodded and followed him down the long hallway, through a set of double doors into an office she had only ever dusted from the outside. It was immaculate, modern, and sparsely decorated. Dark wood shelves held books with uncreased spines. A wall of windows looked out over the private garden. On the far end sat a massive desk of polished oak. He gestured to the chair in front of the desk. "Sit." Maya obeyed, folding her hands in her lap. Preston sat opposite her and remained silent for several seconds. He tapped a pen against the edge of the notepad. She could hear a grandfather clock ticking somewhere in the distance. It felt like a courtroom, and she didn't know if she was the witness or the accused. "You handled him like someone who'd done it 100 times, he said finally. "I haven't, not with him. Just with someone like him." "Your brother?" "Yes, sir. Jermaine. He passed away 4 years ago. He was 10. Preston's eyes flicked up, and for a moment something human passed across his face. "I'm sorry. Thank you." He was silent again. Then he leaned back in his chair. "No therapist, no specialist, no trained professional has been able to calm Eli down like that. Not in 2 years. They all failed. And you? You just walked in there with a rag in your hand and fixed him." Maya's throat tightened. "I didn't fix him, sir. I just saw him." "Ugh." That stopped him. The pen he'd been tapping fell still. "You saw him. Children like Eli, they don't need to be fixed. They need to be heard. You can't rush their silence. You have to be willing to sit in it with them." Preston blinked slowly. "You sound like someone who should be doing more than mopping floors." "I'm just someone who needed a job, sir. My grandmother's got medical bills, and this pays better than the diner." He looked down at his notes, then closed the notepad altogether. "I want to make you an offer." Maya blinked. "Sir, I need someone who can connect with Eli," he said, not giving her the space to finish. "Someone who can be consistent, not another overqualified stranger with a clipboard and a 2-week contract. Someone he already trusts. I'm not a nanny. I don't need a nanny. I need you." She shook her head gently. "Sir, with all due respect, I'll double your pay," he said, interrupting her again. "You'll stay in the staff wing, private room, all expenses handled. Weekends off, health insurance if you don't already have any, and you'll never lift a mop again." Maya felt her heart racing. The numbers danced in her head. That kind of money could mean real treatment for Grandma Loretta. No more skipped medications. No more stretching food stamps. But she also knew the risk. This wasn't just a job. This was a boy with fragile patterns and even more fragile trust. If she accepted and failed him, it wouldn't be just another nanny leaving. It would be betrayal. I don't know if I can." Preston leaned forward, elbows on his desk. "Look, I've had behaviorists with degrees from Stanford, nannies from elite agencies, even a family counselor who charged $2,000 an hour. None of them lasted more than a week. You walked in, said nothing, and my son laid his head on your shoulder. I don't know what that is, but I know it's rare." Maya swallowed. "It's not magic, sir. It's just care. That's even rarer." She looked down at her hands, chipped nail polish and all. She thought about Loretta, about the quiet way she'd say, "Baby, if God opens a door, don't stand there arguing about the knob." "When would I start?" "Tomorrow morning. I'll have the room prepared tonight." Maya nodded. "Okay, I'll try." Preston stood and extended his hand. She shook it, small and firm. As she left the office, her mind was racing. She hadn't packed for a live-in job. She hadn't even told her landlord she was leaving. But beneath all that noise was something quieter, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. A new chapter begins for Maya and Eli. What do you think this change will mean for them? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Unheard Voices channel to keep up with the story. The next morning, Maya arrived with a small duffel bag slung over her shoulder and a cardboard box tucked under her arm. The housekeeper, Mrs. Green, led her to the staff quarters, on the east side of the mansion near the back garden. The room was simple but warm. A twin bed, a reading chair, a desk facing the window. Mr. Vale had this redone last night, Mrs. Green said, handing Maya a key card. Said you were important. I'm just a helper. Maybe, but he don't give spare rooms to helpers. Maya smiled politely and unpacked quickly. She hung her clothes on hangers and placed a small framed photo of Loretta on the nightstand. By 9:30 a.m., she stood outside Eli's nursery again. This time, when she entered, the boy was already awake. He sat on the rug, sorting colored blocks into two piles, red and blue. "Morning, Eli," she said softly. He didn't look up, but he paused just for a beat. She stepped closer, sat cross-legged a few feet away, quiet, non-threatening. After a few minutes, he nudged a red block toward her with his toe. She smiled. "Thanks." She pushed a blue block back. The game had begun. Hours passed like that. No words, just color, rhythm, repetition. At one point, she began to hum a soft, low, familiar gospel tune. Eli didn't protest. In fact, he leaned in slightly, the way someone might toward a warm fire. Preston watched from the doorway in silence. He wasn't ready to say it out loud, but something about the way Maya sat there, still and steady, not trying to fix or force, made his chest ache in a way he didn't understand yet. Not grief, not fear. Something else. Hope. Maya stood by the window of the nursery as dusk crept in, her arms loosely folded and her gaze fixed on the garden below. The day had passed more quietly than she expected. No screaming, no outbursts, no frantic running. Eli hadn't spoken, of course. He still moved in silence, mostly engaged with the wooden puzzles and color-sorting game she had laid out, but he had let her sit closer this time. He hadn't flinched when she sang a soft tune under her breath. He had even touched her sleeve once, briefly, when she reached across him for a blue triangle piece. That one small touch had lit something in her, a cautious, almost sacred kind of hope. Behind her, she heard soft footsteps. She turned just as Preston Vale entered the nursery. He wasn't in his usual suit, just a white shirt with the cuffs rolled in gray slacks. His face looked less carved than usual, a little softer around the eyes. "How was he today?" he asked, his voice quieter than the sharp bark she remembered from their first meeting. "Peaceful," she said, a faint smile lifting the corner of her lips. No meltdowns, no biting or hitting. He was steady. Preston stepped farther into the room, his eyes on his son, who was now lying on his stomach, carefully pushing a toy train along the track. "I don't know what you're doing," he muttered. "But it's working." "It's not a trick, Mr. Vale," she replied gently. "It's time. It's presence." And letting him lead. He nodded slowly, as if trying to understand a language he had never learned to read. "He used to love trains," he said suddenly. "Emma, my wife, used to take him to the Railroad Museum every other Saturday." Maya's gaze turned toward Preston. His face had turned toward the window now, eyes distant. "He hasn't asked to go since she passed," he continued, his voice low and even. "Not once. She didn't say anything, didn't push, just let the silence speak its part. I thought we were doing okay," he went on. "After the funeral, I hired the best therapists money could find, enrolled him in every specialized program that accepted him. I spared nothing. But it only got worse. The tantrums, the fear of strangers, the screaming." He turned back to Maya. "And now here you are, and he's calmer than I've seen in over a year." Maya shifted slightly. "Grief isn't something you treat like a flu, Mr. Vale. It's not linear. Not for you. Not for him." Preston didn't answer right away. Then he asked, "Do you think he remembers her?" "I think he feels her absence," she said after a pause, "even if he doesn't know how to say it." He sat in the armchair by the bookshelf, elbows on his knees, looking at his son with something between guilt and awe. "I was married for 10 years, he said suddenly. "We met in college. I was rigid. She was jazz. She laughed too loud. Danced barefoot on our balcony in the rain. Made breakfast at midnight." Maya smiled. "She sounds wonderful." She was, he said, and something in his voice cracked, just slightly. Eli looked up for a moment and locked eyes with his father. Preston stood and approached his son slowly. "Hey, bud," he said softly, crouching beside him. "How's the train coming?" Eli didn't speak, didn't react, but he didn't recoil either. Preston looked up at Maya. "You think he'll ever talk again?" "I think he already is," she replied, her eyes warm. "You just have to learn to listen to the version of language he trusts." He held his son's gaze a moment longer, then nodded and rose. "The bond between Preston and Maya is growing. What do you think will happen as they continue to learn from each other? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Unheard Voices for more of this moving story." Later that evening, Maya returned to her room in the staff wing. It was modest, but comfortable. She had unpacked what little she had: 3 changes of clothes, 2 books, a battered journal, and a framed photo of her grandmother, Loretta, holding a young Germain. She picked it up now and ran her thumb across the glass. "You'd like him," she whispered. "He's a mess, but he's trying." There was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Mrs. Green holding a tray with a covered plate and a folded napkin. "Mr. Vale says you haven't eaten since lunch," the older woman said, a curious note in her voice. "He insisted you get a proper dinner." Maya blinked. I didn't realize. I lost track of time." Apparently, so did the boy. "He didn't scream at all today." Miracle of miracles. Maya accepted the tray with a grateful smile. "Thank you." Before she turned to go, Mrs. Green lingered. "Don't get too comfortable," she warned, but her voice held no malice. "Mr. Vale changes moods like the wind." Maya nodded once. "I don't expect anything." She closed the door and sat down at her desk, lifting the lid on the plate. Grilled salmon, roasted sweet potatoes, and green beans. Her stomach grumbled in response. As she ate, her mind kept replaying the image of Preston on the floor beside his son. It had been brief, but genuine, vulnerable. And she couldn't help but wonder, what kind of man tries to control the world, but forgets how to hold his child? The next morning, Maya entered the nursery at 8:30 sharp. Eli was already awake, sitting by the window, tracing shapes on the glass with his finger. The sunlight cut a warm line across the carpet. "Morning, Eli," she said softly, approaching slowly. He didn't turn, but he didn't stiffen either. She sat beside him, not too close. After a few quiet minutes, she took out a small whiteboard and a dry erase marker. "I thought we could try something," she said gently. She drew a sun, then a cloud, then handed the marker to him. He stared at it for a long moment, then took it slowly and drew a crooked heart. Maya smiled, even as tears stung behind her eyes. From the hallway, Preston had stopped outside the door. He watched the moment through the crack in the frame, his hand hovering near the handle, but not opening it. Something inside him was shifting slowly, painfully, like an old hinge learning to swing again. He turned away before they noticed, but his thoughts stayed in the room. That night, he sat alone in his study with a glass of scotch he didn't drink. On the desk lay a file: Maya Williams' employee application, her background check, and a handwritten reference letter from her former manager at a diner in Queens. He read the note twice. "She's not fancy, but she shows up early, works late, and never complains. She's kind, and she knows how to listen, even when people don't know how to talk." Preston folded the paper and leaned back in his chair. Outside, the wind stirred the trees along the stone fence. Inside, for the first time in months, the silence felt like comfort, not a void. In a house built by money, guarded by rules, and haunted by loss, someone had finally arrived who didn't try to fix the cracks. She simply sat beside them. And for Eli, and maybe for Preston, too, that was enough to begin again. It had been nearly 3 weeks since Maya Williams had taken the job that wasn't hers to begin with, caring for the boy no one could reach. And by now, her presence in the Vale mansion had gone from anomaly to necessity. Each morning she entered Eli's nursery with the same quiet ritual: no sudden movements, no grand gestures, just the steady rhythm of showing up. And in return, Eli began to offer more. He hadn't spoken, not once, but his eyes began to seek her out. He followed her with silent trust. He handed her objects, little things, a block, a button, a puzzle piece, as if they were messages he didn't yet know how to write. That morning, Maya laid a new routine before him. She brought in a soft mat, some scented clay, and a series of cards with emotions drawn in bold, cartoonish expressions. "This one's happy," she said, showing the first card. "Happy, like when the music plays." Eli took the card, touched it once, then looked up at her face. Slowly, he pressed the card to his own chest. "Yeah," she whispered. "That's right." When Preston came home that evening, the house felt different again. Not silent the way it had been for a year. Not empty, but humming faintly with signs of life. In the kitchen, Mrs. Green had soft jazz playing from the tablet. The windows were cracked open. Somewhere upstairs, a child laughed. Not loud, not boisterous, but a quick, pure giggle that stopped him in his tracks. He dropped his keys onto the hallway console and followed the sound. Maya was kneeling on the living room carpet, a toy giraffe in one hand, a sock puppet on the other. Eli sat across from her, cross-legged, watching intently as the giraffe and the sock puppet mimed a silly fight over a cup of pretend tea. When the sock puppet fell over with a squeaky oof, Eli's mouth stretched into a full smile. No sound came, but his whole face lit up. Preston couldn't remember the last time he'd seen it. Maya noticed him in the doorway. She straightened quickly, brushing lint from her slacks. "Mr. Vale, I didn't hear you come in." He walked in slowly, still looking at Eli. "Was that him laughing?" She nodded. "Sort of. No sound, but he's getting close." Preston crouched beside his son. "Hey, buddy," he said. Eli didn't retreat. He didn't flinch. He reached out and touched his father's shirt briefly before turning back to the toys. Preston felt his throat tighten. "He's trusting you more," Maya said softly. Preston nodded, but didn't look away from his son. He used to play with Emma like that. She had this sock puppet voice. It was ridiculous, but he loved it. He stood up and looked down at Maya. "Thank you." She gave a faint smile, eyes warm. "I'm not doing anything you couldn't do." "That's the part one finds hardest to believe," he said, half joking, half defeated. Later that night, Maya made her way to the small garden behind the staff wing. It was late spring, and the azaleas had just started to bloom. She carried a mug of tea, her grandmother's blend, cinnamon, and dried hibiscus. She sat on the wooden bench under the magnolia tree and breathed. She'd been afraid at first that her time here would be temporary. That one wrong word, one wrong moment, would send her back to mopping floors. But Preston hadn't just tolerated her. He'd started seeking her out. At first only about Eli, then about meals, then books, and lately just conversation. She didn't fool herself into thinking she belonged in his world. He was white, wealthy, powerful, and guarded. She was none of those things. But when they talked, truly talked, there was something level in it. Human. The garden gate creaked behind her. She turned. Preston stood in the moonlight holding 2 mugs. "I thought you might like chamomile," he said. She blinked, surprised. "That's very thoughtful. I figured it's either that or more bourbon. And you don't strike me as a bourbon before bed person." She chuckled. "That would put me straight on my back." He sat beside her, not too close. "You come out here every night when I can't sleep." "Same." They sipped in silence for a moment. "I've been meaning to ask," he said, his voice quieter now, more careful. "Your brother, what happened?" She exhaled slow. "He had a seizure. Complications from an infection. He passed in the hospital while I was filling out paperwork for insurance." Preston looked at her. "I'm sorry." "Thank you." He was quiet, then said, "That sounds like Eli." "Yeah," she said softly. "It does." Another pause. Preston ran a hand through his hair. "You make this look easy, but I know it's not. I know I'm difficult, that this house can be cold, that Eli's challenges can be overwhelming." She turned to him. "You're not difficult, Mr. Vale. You're just grieving in the only way you know how." His eyes met hers. "Call me Preston, please." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, Preston." A gust of wind rustled the branches. The lights from the second floor glowed softly through the windows. Somewhere above them, Eli stirred in his bed. "I want to learn," Preston said suddenly. "I want to know what you know about him, about how to reach him." Maya's heart beat faster. "You're already halfway there." "No, I watch you with him. The way you read his cues, the way you understand what he needs before he asks. I don't have that instinct." "You don't need instinct," she said. "You need willingness. And he'll teach you if you're patient enough to listen." He looked at her, and for a moment something shifted in the air between them. "I want to try," he said. And for the first time, Maya saw not the CEO, not the man with perfect posture and calculated words, but a father, uncertain, flawed, and finally ready. The next day, everything changed. Maya led a small lesson in the living room. Simple sign language. More, stop, help, love. Preston joined them, clumsy but earnest. Eli watched, then copied. At one point, Preston signed more, and Eli responded with a half-formed version of the same gesture. Preston's eyes filled, but he didn't say a word, just nodded, smiled, and reached for his son's hand. Later that evening, Maya wrote in her journal by the window, recounting the moment. "He's coming back to his son," she wrote. "Not as a savior, not as a fixer, but as a father learning a new language. One built on silence, trust, and steady hands." She looked up as a knock came at her door. Preston stood outside holding a book. "I found this in Emma's things," he said. "It's about parenting children with sensory disorders. I thought you might want to read it together." She took it gently. "I'd like that." And then he added before walking away, "Thank you for staying." That night, Maya sat on her bed, the book in her lap and the memory of Jermaine warm in her chest. She wasn't just staying. She was building something, slowly, quietly, like Eli's laughter, like trust blooming between unlikely hands. The early summer light streamed through the nursery windows, casting golden beams onto the wooden floor. Maya sat cross-legged across from Eli, gently encouraging him to press different animal shapes into a soft patch of kinetic sand. It was part of their morning routine now, sensory time before breakfast, a calm, consistent way to ease him into the day. Eli didn't speak, but he responded more and more with eye contact, small gestures, even tentative smiles. When Maya sang softly, he swayed. When she laughed, he tilted his head to watch her longer. And once, when she reached for the sand mold he liked, he touched her wrist and pushed it gently toward her. "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't respond, but his fingers brushed her palm in reply. Preston had begun joining these sessions 3 times a week. He no longer hovered in the background, arms folded and unreadable. Now he knelt beside his son, mimicking Maya's gestures, learning the signs slowly but with deep concentration. "Cow," Maya signed that morning, forming the horns with her fingers. Eli didn't copy, but he stared, then pointed to the small cow figure on the mat and pressed it into the sand with surprising care. Preston laughed quietly but genuinely. "He's getting it," he said. Maya smiled, then turned toward him. "So are you." The small moments of connection are growing stronger. What do you think will be the next big step in this family's healing process? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Unheard Voices channel for more. That afternoon, Preston invited her to walk the garden with him after lunch. Eli had fallen asleep in the sunroom, a blanket loosely wrapped around him and a stuffed bear held tight in one hand. Maya hesitated for a moment, unsure if this was still professional, but then followed him out past the manicured hedges down toward the old gazebo. They walked slowly side by side. Preston had removed his jacket and loosened his collar. It was the first time she'd seen him without that ever-present armor. "Eli's therapist called this morning," he said. "I didn't mention it earlier because I wanted to see how today went." Maya looked up. "Is everything all right?" She noted significant behavioral improvements. "He's beginning to trust again." "That takes more than therapy," Maya said softly. "That takes safety." Preston nodded, hands in his pockets. She also asked what changed in the home environment. "I told her it was you." Maya chuckled, brushing a braid back behind her ear. "I'm just one part of it." He stopped walking and turned toward her. "You're the part that matters." She met his eyes, and for a brief second, the world narrowed. The breeze slowed. The sound of birds faded. Preston's expression was different now. Not the guarded, clipped detachment she'd come to expect, but something quieter, raw. "Before Emma died," he began, his voice more gravel than usual. "She said I was always 2 steps behind, that I never saw what was in front of me until it was too late." Maya said nothing, only listened. She handled everything. The school forms, the therapy sessions, the tantrums. "I just wrote the checks." He swallowed hard. "And when she got sick, I panicked. I started controlling everything, as if order could save her, as if structure could replace her presence." "Grief makes us grasp for anything that doesn't move," Maya said gently. "Because what moves might disappear." He looked at her sharply, surprised, then slowly nodded. "You speak like someone who's lost something." "Someone who's lost someone," she corrected, her voice barely above a whisper. We all carry echoes. They continued walking in silence. The shadows stretched across the garden. Maya reached out and touched a blooming camellia. These used to grow outside my grandmother's porch, she murmured. She used to say they were stubborn flowers, that they bloomed when they felt like it, not when others expected them to. Sounds familiar, Preston said. She smiled. I suppose it does. That evening, as the sun dipped low and Eli napped on the couch, Maya found herself in the study. Preston had invited her to review an old therapy binder he'd found in the closet, notes and videos from Eli's earliest sessions. Emma filmed everything, he said, handing her a USB drive. She always said, one day, we'll forget the hard parts and miss the details. Let's save the details. Maya sat at the desk and opened the folder on the screen. The first video began to play. A much younger Eli, maybe 4 years old, sat at a low table with a therapist. Emma's voice narrated gently from behind the camera, coaching Preston on how to use signs for eat, sleep, and mom. Maya watched in stillness as the video continued. In one clip, Eli reached toward Preston and signed love clumsily. Emma's laughter followed. That's your daddy, baby. Good job. Maya turned slightly in her chair to see Preston standing in the doorway. He didn't enter, just watched. His face had gone pale. I forgot about that video, he said. I haven't watched these since before the funeral. She was good with him. She was everything, he replied. His voice cracked just a little. And I erased her. Maya stood and walked slowly to where he was. No, you didn't. You were surviving. You were breaking open in silence. Preston looked down at her. Is that what I was doing? Yes, but now you're healing. He stared at her, unreadable. And you? Are you healing too? She paused. I think so. Some days more than others. For a long moment, they stood there, nothing but the soft hum of the computer and the ghost of Emma's laughter playing faintly in the background. Then, gently, Preston reached out and touched Maya's hand. She didn't pull away. That night, something changed. Not in words, not in declarations, but in presence. Maya lay in bed, unable to sleep. Her heart beat fast, not from fear, but from awareness. Something was forming between them. Something unspoken, but undeniable. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a visitor in someone else's story. She felt like she might belong to it. Upstairs, Eli stirred in his sleep and mumbled a sound, soft, high-pitched, almost a word. Maya didn't hear it, but the house did. It was listening now, and so was she. The next morning began with the smell of cinnamon drifting through the kitchen. Maya stood barefoot on the tile floor, gently flipping slices of French toast on the skillet. Her apron was dusted with flour, and a faint smile played on her lips as she hummed an old Sam Cooke tune under her breath. It was a quiet joy, simple, rooted, something she hadn't felt in years. Preston entered the room quietly, freshly showered and dressed in a white button-down and gray slacks, but without a tie for once. He paused at the doorway, watching her work. Didn't know breakfast could sound so good, he said softly. Maya glanced over her shoulder. You mean smell? He leaned against the door frame. No, I meant what I said. There was a pause, light but meaningful. She slid 2 golden slices onto a plate and turned off the stove. Eli's still asleep, she said. Thought I'd surprise him. He likes the edges a little crispy. Preston stepped into the kitchen and began setting out forks and napkins. You always remember the details. Maya looked down, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. The details are where the heart lives. He stopped for a moment, considering her words, then resumed setting the table. I never noticed how empty this place felt until you started filling it. Before Maya could respond, the baby monitor on the counter crackled softly. Eli's sleepy whimper, then the gentle thump of his feet hitting the carpet. Maya moved instinctively, removing her apron. I'll go. Preston touched her wrist. Let me. It was a subtle shift, but she understood. This was his moment now. She watched as he walked out of the kitchen and up the stairs. A man who used to keep one hand on the world and one foot out the door, now fully present. When he returned with Eli in his arms, the boy was clutching a small plush bear and blinking against the morning light. Preston set him gently in his booster chair and sat next to him. Good morning, buddy, Maya said, placing the plate in front of him. Your favorite? Eli didn't answer, but he picked up a piece of toast with his fingers and began chewing slowly. Maya watched the way Preston helped him dab syrup on it, his movements careful, patient. There was no rush in the room, No pressure, just connection. Later that day, the house welcomed a guest, Dr. Lydia Chun, Eli's longtime developmental psychologist. A petite woman with sharp eyes behind silver-framed glasses, she had known Eli since he was 2. She stepped into the foyer with a calm smile. "Still smells like expensive silence in here," she said, half teasing. Preston chuckled. "That's changing." Maya offered her a glass of water and escorted her to the sunroom where Eli was stacking wooden blocks by the window. Preston watched from the doorway, his hands clenched just a bit. Dr. Chun observed the boy quietly, then leaned toward Maya. "He's focused," she whispered. "And peaceful." Preston stepped in. "Do you see progress?" Dr. Chun nodded slowly. "Not just in behavior. In attachment. He's bonding." Preston looked at Maya. Dr. Chun followed his gaze. "Tell me, Miss Williams, what are you doing differently?" Maya hesitated. "I treat him like he's already whole, not broken." Dr. Chin studied her. "That's rare." "It shouldn't be," Maya replied softly. After the session, Dr. Chin pulled Preston aside. "You've done more than hire help," she said. "You've invited something sacred into this house. Don't forget that." Preston didn't respond right away. He watched Maya in the distance, kneeling beside Eli, showing him how to sign happy with her hands. His son mimicked her perfectly, shyly, but it was there. That afternoon, Maya wandered out to the garden alone, needing space to think. The camellias were blooming fuller now, thick with pink and white petals. She sat on the stone bench and exhaled slowly. She was growing attached, dangerously so. This was meant to be temporary. A job, a brief chapter between responsibilities. But somewhere in the quiet moments, in Eli's touch and Preston's changing eyes, it had begun to feel like more. She reached into her bag and pulled out an old photo, her mother and younger sister on a porch swing. Her mother was laughing, head tilted back. Her sister's hands were caught mid-sign. Maya traced their faces with a thumb. "I still carry you," she whispered. Behind her, footsteps approached. "I hope I'm not interrupting." It was Preston's voice, gentle now. Maya quickly tucked the photo away. "Just thinking." He sat beside her, not too close. "I've been meaning to ask," he began, then paused. "Why did you take this job?" She turned to him, eyes calm. "Because I needed to remember who I was. And I thought maybe, just maybe, I could help someone do the same." Preston nodded. "You've helped more than you know." A beat. Then Maya said, "And you? Why did you really hire me?" He hesitated. "At first, desperation. I was exhausted, out of ideas. But then I saw how Eli looked at you. Not afraid, not shrinking, just still." They were quiet for a moment. "I owe you an apology," Preston added. "When you first arrived, I dismissed you. I made assumptions. You thought I was just a maid," she said without malice. He looked ashamed. "Yes." Maya met his eyes. "People do all the time." "But you're not," he said. "No," she whispered. "I'm someone who sees people others overlook." He nodded slowly. "You saw him, and now I see you." Something shifted in the air between them, delicate and dangerous. That evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows painted the hallways, Maya passed by the open study door. Inside, Preston sat at the piano, an old upright piece Maya had dusted off weeks earlier. He struck a few tentative chords, then began to play a melody, halting, unsure, but lovely. She stood quietly, listening. When he finished, she stepped inside. "I didn't know you played." "I used to," he said. "Emma made me promise I'd teach Eli one day." "Keep that promise," Maya said. "Music speaks even when we don't." He looked up. "Would you sit with me?" She did. He began again, slower this time. Maya hummed along, then without thinking, began to sign the lyrics to an old lullaby. Her hands moved with grace, her face lit with tenderness. Preston stopped playing and just watched. "You're extraordinary," he said quietly. Maya looked at him, her hands still mid-motion. "I'm just present," she replied. "Most people aren't." Preston reached out, brushing a fingertip against her wrist. It was a question. She didn't pull away. It was an answer. Upstairs, Eli stirred in his bed, and for the first time, called out, not with a cry, but a word. "Dada." It echoed down the staircase like a bell. Preston froze. Maya gasped, and the house, so long cloaked in silence and grief, suddenly felt alive again. A single word can change everything. Eli's first word is a powerful turning point in their story. What do you think this moment means for the future of this family? Share your thoughts in the comments. And for more emotional moments, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Unheard Voices channel. The word hung in the air like a fragile miracle. Dada. It wasn't loud. It wasn't perfectly clear, but it was there, real, alive. Preston shot to his feet, nearly knocking the piano bench over. Maya was already moving, her instincts sharper than her thoughts, and together they raced up the stairs. The world suddenly sharpened into focus by that single word. Eli sat upright in bed, his small hands gripping the edge of the blanket. His eyes were wide, not frightened, just uncertain, as if he himself was unsure what had come out of his mouth. But when he saw Preston at the door, something flickered across his face, recognition, a kind of vulnerable hope. Preston dropped to his knees beside the bed. "Say it again," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Please, just one more time." Eli blinked, lips parting. He looked at Maya standing just behind, then back at his father. No words came, just a tiny hand reaching forward, resting against Preston's chest. It was enough. Preston wrapped his arms around his son, holding him as though he'd fall apart if he didn't. "You did it," he murmured over and over, forehead pressed gently to Eli's hair. "You did it, buddy." Maya stood quietly in the doorway, hands clasped to her chest. She didn't intrude, didn't speak. This moment belonged to them, but her eyes, wet, soft, glowing, held the quiet satisfaction of someone who had given a piece of herself and was now watching something sacred bloom. The following morning, the house felt transformed. There was light in the windows that hadn't been noticed before, warmth in the silence that used to echo hollowly. Even the staff moved differently, slower, quieter, reverent, as if they sensed a shift. None of them could explain it. Preston canceled all his meetings for the day. His assistant didn't question it. "Family day," he said. Non-negotiable. He spent the morning with Eli, reading picture books in the sunroom, building towers out of plastic bricks, and most remarkably, getting a giggle when he made a silly face. It wasn't much, but it was a sound Preston had waited years to hear. A sound that brought him to the edge of tears more than once. Maya stayed near, not hovering, just present. She brought snacks, wiped sticky fingers, offered soft encouragements, and whenever Eli looked her way, he smiled. Small, fleeting smiles, but smiles nonetheless. Around noon, Dr. Lydia Chun returned, unannounced, but not unwelcome. Preston had texted her the night before. 3 words, all caps, he said, "Dada." She stepped into the foyer like a detective entering a scene of quiet joy. "You weren't kidding," she said after watching Eli play for 5 minutes. "His eyes are clearer. He's grounding." Preston nodded. Maya was there when it happened. Dr. Chin turned. "That doesn't surprise me." They stepped aside into the dining room, letting Eli and Maya play uninterrupted. "You know, this changes everything," Lydia said. "I know you'll need to consider long-term care, adjust your routines, possibly reintroduce therapies. His progress may accelerate now. I want you to lead it," Preston said. "But only if Maya stays involved." Lydia raised a brow. "She's not a therapist, Preston." "She's something better," he replied. "She's someone he trusts." That afternoon, Maya excused herself to take a short break. She walked to the garden again, her place of reflection, and sat by the camellias. The spring breeze teased her braids, and she tilted her face toward the sun, letting it warm her skin. She should be happy. Eli had spoken. Preston was changing, but there was a tremor in her chest she couldn't quite name. She was growing roots where she'd promised herself she wouldn't. She reached into her bag and pulled out an old photo, her mother and younger sister on a porch swing. Her mother was laughing, head tilted back. Her sister's hands were caught mid-sign. Maya traced their faces with a thumb. "I still carry you," she whispered. Behind her, footsteps approached. "I hope I'm not interrupting." It was Preston's voice, gentle now. Maya quickly tucked the photo away. "Just thinking." He sat beside her on the bench. "Not too close." "I've been meaning to ask," he began, then paused. "Why did you take this job?" She turned to him, eyes calm. "Because I needed to remember who I was. And I thought maybe, just maybe, I could help someone do the same." Preston nodded. "You've helped more than you know." A beat. Then Maya said, "And you? Why did you really hire me?" He hesitated. "At first, desperation. I was exhausted, out of ideas. But then I saw how Eli looked at you. Not afraid, not shrinking, just still." They were quiet for a moment. "I owe you an apology," Preston added. When you first arrived, I dismissed you. I made assumptions. You thought I was just a maid, she said without malice. He looked ashamed. Yes. Maya met his eyes. People do all the time. But you're not, he said. No, she whispered. I'm someone who sees people others overlook. He nodded slowly. You saw him, and now I see you. Something shifted in the air between them, delicate and dangerous. That evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows painted the hallways, Maya passed by the open study door. Inside, Preston sat at the piano, an old upright piece Maya had dusted off weeks earlier. He struck a few tentative chords, then began to play a melody, halting, unsure, but lovely. She stood quietly, listening. When he finished, she stepped inside. I didn't know you played. I used to, he said. Emma made me promise I'd teach Eli one day. Keep that promise, Maya said. Music speaks even when we don't. He looked up. Would you sit with me? She did. He began again, slower this time. Maya hummed along, then without thinking, began to sign the lyrics to an old lullaby. Her hands moved with grace, her face lit with tenderness. Preston stopped playing and just watched. You're extraordinary, he said quietly. Maya looked at him, her hands still mid-motion. I'm just present, she replied. Most people aren't. Preston reached out, brushing a fingertip against her wrist. It was a question. She didn't pull away. It was an answer. Upstairs, Eli stirred in his bed, and for the first time, called out, not with a cry, but a word. Dada. It echoed down the staircase like a bell. Preston froze. Maya gasped. And the house, so long cloaked in silence and grief, suddenly felt alive again. The word hung in the air like a fragile miracle. Dada. It wasn't loud. It wasn't perfectly clear, but it was there, real, alive. Preston shot to his feet, nearly knocking the piano bench over. Maya was already moving, her instincts sharper than her thoughts, and together they raced up the stairs. The world suddenly sharpened into focus by that single word. Eli sat upright in bed, his small hands gripping the edge of the blanket. His eyes were wide, not frightened, just uncertain, as if he himself was unsure what had come out of his mouth. But when he saw Preston at the door, something flickered across his face, recognition, a kind of vulnerable hope. Preston dropped to his knees beside the bed. Say it again, he whispered, his voice trembling. Please, just one more time. Eli blinked, lips parting. He looked at Maya standing just behind, then back at his father. No words came. Just a tiny hand reaching forward, resting against Preston's chest. It was enough. Preston wrapped his arms around his son, holding him as though he'd fall apart if he didn't. You did it, he murmured over and over, forehead pressed gently to Eli's hair. You did it, buddy. Maya stood quietly in the doorway, hands clasped to her chest. She didn't intrude, didn't speak. This moment belonged to them, but her eyes, wet, soft, glowing, held the quiet satisfaction of someone who had given a piece of herself and was now watching something sacred bloom. The following morning carried a kind of stillness that felt unfamiliar. Not the quiet of uncertainty, but the calm that follows after a long, punishing storm. Sunlight spilled through the estate's tall windows, warming the marble floors that once felt too cold, too sterile. Now the house seemed a living thing, not with noise but with peace. Maya stood at the kitchen counter, making pancakes from scratch. Eli sat on a stool nearby, still in his pajamas, watching her with the soft gaze of a child who finally felt safe. He didn't speak, rarely did, but he signed one word with gentle fingers. Happy. Maya's chest tightened. She turned to him and signed back. Me too. Behind them, Preston entered quietly, a cup of coffee in hand, tie still hanging loosely around his neck. His presence no longer carried the guarded stiffness of a corporate giant. Now there was a softness in his eyes that Maya hadn't seen when they first met. Smells like you're trying to spoil him, he teased lightly. She gave him a wry smile. If he's going to start his day watching the morning news talk about his dad, he deserves pancakes. Preston sighed, glancing at the muted television in the corner where a live interview was airing. One of the anchors read headlines off a prompter. Caldwell family scandal ends with unexpected hero, the housemaid who stood against a corporation. The boy who spoke through silence. They're not going to let this go anytime soon, he muttered. I know, Maya replied, flipping a pancake. But we don't need them to. Eli giggled as the pancake landed perfectly in the pan. It was such a simple sound, so small, but it carried weight. It was joy, and in this house, joy had been rare. That afternoon, a letter arrived via private courier. It was hand-delivered and sealed in a cream-colored envelope addressed to Maya. Her brows furrowed as she opened it carefully. Preston watched her from the library doorway. Something wrong. She unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the handwritten lines, and blinked in disbelief. "It's from Judge Monroe," she whispered. "She's offering to nominate me for the state's Child Welfare Advisory Board." Preston stepped forward, startled. That's significant. She says she believes my experience, personal and professional, could help shape future policies." Maya didn't answer immediately. Her fingers tightened around the paper. "It's not just about Eli, is it? It's bigger than him. There are more kids like him out there." Preston nodded solemnly. "And not enough people willing to fight for them." For the first time since this entire ordeal began, Maya saw something beyond the mansion, beyond even Eli. She saw a path, a purpose, not to escape who she was, but to become more of it. Later that day, the three of them drove out to a modest community center on the edge of the city. The building was old, but clean, its faded blue doors welcoming. Maya had learned about it through one of the lawyers at the trial, an after-school program for children with disabilities, mostly underfunded and understaffed. Inside, children sat in circles, some drawing, others using tablets with assistive communication. One young boy, maybe 7, struggled with his hands, trying to form letters in the air. Maya knelt beside him and gently guided his fingers. "Like this," she said softly, signing the word home. He repeated it, his smile stretching wide as he got it right. Preston stood in the doorway, Eli beside him, holding his hand. Neither said a word, but their expressions were identical: awe, admiration, and something tender. When they left, the director of the center followed Maya out. "If you ever wanted to volunteer or teach here, our doors are open." She paused, then looked down at Eli, who was now signing to Preston. "I think I'd like that." That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the walls in hues of gold, Maya sat alone in the garden. The scent of blooming jasmine drifted through the air, mingling with the distant sound of wind chimes. She held the judge's letter in one hand and her phone in the other. She finally called someone she hadn't spoken to in years, her mother's sister, Aunt Lorraine. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Maya, sweetheart." Her throat tightened. "Hi, I just wanted to hear your voice." "Oh, baby, I saw you on the news. I told your cousins, that girl right there, that's my niece, that's Maya Williams, and she's got more courage in her little finger than most people have in their whole body." Maya blinked away tears. "I didn't think I'd come this far." "Well, you did, and your mama would be proud." They talked for nearly an hour. Laughter returned. Pain surfaced, but so did healing. By the time they said goodbye, Maya felt a piece of herself return, one she didn't know she'd lost. Later that night, Maya walked into the nursery. Eli was already tucked into bed, a small nightlight glowing beside him. She leaned down, kissed his forehead, and turned to leave. "Wait," he whispered. She turned, startled. It was the first word he had spoken aloud in months. He pointed to her and whispered again. "Stay." Maya blinked, swallowed the lump in her throat, and sat beside him. He reached for her hand and closed his eyes. Downstairs, Preston stood at the foot of the staircase, listening. When Maya finally joined him, his eyes searched hers. "You okay?" "I'm more than okay," she said. He hesitated. "There's something I want to ask." She tilted her head. "I know this isn't how things usually go, and I don't want to rush anything, but I'd like you to stay. Not just as staff, as family." Maya's breath caught. "I'm not asking for answers tonight," Preston said. "I just wanted you to know that no matter what title the world gives you, witness, advocate, you've already become something far more important to me." She looked away, heart pounding. This was never about love. No, he agreed. It was about truth. But sometimes, when the truth is finally safe, love follows. In the following weeks, Maya accepted the judge's nomination. She joined advocacy circles, traveled with Preston and Eli to community meetings, and started designing inclusive curriculums for schools. Her story spread quietly, respectfully, not as a fairy tale, but as a reminder that sometimes it's not the powerful who change the world, it's the ones who dare to care when no one else will. One spring morning, nearly a year later, A framed photo sat on Preston's office desk. It showed Maya and Eli sitting beneath a tree, sunlight filtering through the leaves, both of them laughing with abandon. Above the image, in small engraved letters, it read, "Family is the place where the storm breaks." And beneath it, a simple quote from Maya herself, "Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just showing up and staying." What a beautiful conclusion to their story. What did you think of their journey? Let us know in the comments below. And be sure to subscribe to the Unheard Voices channel for more stories that will move you.